Hello. This is our next to last video of the May challenge where I'm looking for 200 birds in May. We go through Nebraska, Colorado, and even stop off in Nevada a little bit on our way back to California. The last video I guess I'll have to do in California only. So it's getting tight. I need a lot of birds. Let's see if I get some today. The day started at the Marsh Wren Community Wetlands, a great little salt marsh in a farming community. The first bird I was able to video turned out to be a robin. You can hear how thrilled I am. Things picked up in a hurry, though. Dick Sissels. I haven't seen Dick Sissels in a long time, since my big year in 2019. I used to see them sometimes in Alabama, too, before that, migrating through in the winter in that wheeler. They seem to be setting up territories with their singing. I noticed something in a far field. A pheasant. Lucky to see him. I've already seen yellowthroats this trip, but happy to find one more. I've been wondering where all the eastern kingbirds have been this trip. Finally, I found them. There were dozens of them around. I began to examine the marsh to try to figure out the shorebirds. I think this one's a white-rumped sandpiper. His wings are longer than his tail, and he's got some white on his butt there, I believe. This little guy was smaller than the white-rumped sandpipers and had a kind of shorter, thicker bill. I think it's a semi-palmated sandpiper. I'm more sure of these birds, even though they're pretty far off and it's hard to hold the camera steady in this wind. These are Wilson's phalaropes. I see these up on Mono Lake sometimes, and I've seen them both in Colorado and a trip to North Dakota on my big year. When these distant ducks lift their head out of the water, you can tell I've got a shoveler and a blue-winged teal here. I've shown you these in California already, but I needed them in the month of May, so glad to have them. Here's one I've seen at a couple of spots already, but because of the wind and the poor photography, I guess, I don't think I've shown them to you yet. It's a Baltimore oriole. They are so pretty. This killdeer blends in amazingly well with the dirt in this field. Maybe that's how their coloration evolved. It's really hard to see, isn't it? I couldn't get a better angle on the light for this brown thrasher, so you can't really see his pretty color as well as I'd like. What you can see, though, are a pair of yellow-shafted flickers. One flies right by him near the end of this clip. Here's a frame from that previous clip where the yellow-shafted flicker flies by, and then there's one of the pair sitting in the weeds by itself. Strange behavior. I don't know that I've seen him in a weed field like this. This little goldfinch let me get close enough to hear him singing in this big wind. I still wonder, where are all the sparrows? Not many sparrows this trip. Driving through the Rockies on I-70, you're guaranteed some beautiful scenery. I stopped at the Colorado National Monument for a few quick birds. It wasn't the most scenic end. For that scenery, you got to go to the east end, not the west end. These next few shots are from the Colorado National Monument near the town of Fruita in the far western end of Colorado. Here's a juniper titmouse being too skulky to let me video him, but at least I got a picture. Here's a squirrel going to town on all these juniper berries. I show you this First, because the squirrel's cute, but also wondering, why aren't there more birds picking out on all these juniper berries? There should be more birds here. Maybe you can hear the gray vireo singing beneath all the wind sound. I hope so. Trust me, there's a couple of them in there somewhere. This woodhouse scrub jay is grayer than the California jays I usually see. I was hoping for pinyon jays, but couldn't find them. I stopped at a couple rest stops in Utah to look for birds. This one, the San Rafael Reef. I've made it to a rest stop in Utah where I find these ravens either sharing breakfast or plotting to take over the world. Probably that. This rock wren wouldn't sit still long enough for any video, so all I could get was a photo. He sang a lot, though. Another bird claiming territory at the rest stops was this ash-throated flycatcher. A little farther down from the flycatcher, I heard a different song and found this loggerhead shrike staking his claim as well. Emily had told me about a place in Nevada I should go, the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. It was very birdy, but that wind was still whipping. These long-tailed grackles seem to be having trouble hanging onto their tree in the wind. The black ones are the males, the brown ones are the females. You could hear these sharp calls of these western wood peewees all over the refuge. There must have been a flock of them migrating through. Here are some other dry country birds, phainopeplas. The gray is the female. Took me a little while, but I finally found the black male in a tree farther behind. There were a bunch of verdins there, but they were tough to track down too. They kept hiding. I got a tiny bit of video finally, and a picture of one stuck in the corner that you can see here. I'm used to them being a little more yellow. These were pretty gray. I stopped at a spot in Pasadena where I found these Allen's hummingbirds eating bugs over a pond. I thought you might find that interesting. Look real close. They're tiny in this clip, but they're in there. I often see them at the pond near our house, catching bugs. People sometimes are surprised hummingbirds do that. I show this peacock in a parking lot to emphasize that Pasadena's got maybe a couple hundred floating around. A hardcore ABA lister might not count those, but since they're wild, they're reproducing, I might not be a hardcore ABA birder. Here's another thriving exotic, the red-whiskered bulbul. They're native to Asia, but they reproduce and live here in California. Can you guess what these females are before the male joins them? They're pin-tailed whitas, a native of Africa, of all places, another California specialty. I became familiar with them when I worked and lived in Puerto Rico. They're also living down there, wild and free. This invasive is perhaps more common than any I've just shown you, but was a little skulky today. It's a scaly-breasted munia. Seen those not only in Puerto Rico, but in Hawaii. Here's a pleasant surprise, a lazuli bunting joined by the whydah and bulbul. I'd found one in April, but I needed this for May. Thanks for watching. I know these videos are probably as exhausting for you as the trip was for me. One last push in California. Maybe I can take my current 161 total up over 200. We'll see.